Hello, everyone. Our group is Group 3. We are Afrin, Grace, Gagandeep, and Harminder, and we are analyzing the paper Managerial Ties and Firm Performance in a Transition Economy, the Nature of a Micro-Macro Link. So overall, what is our talk about? It's about the concept of managerial ties, methods, analysis, and results of Peng and Lau's paper, which is the paper that we're analyzing concerning managerial ties and firm performance. And then we are going to tie this information into Canadian firms and their managerial ties as well. So managerial ties, what are they? Basically, the writers of this paper have broken managerial ties into two types, top managers to top managers and top managers to government officials. Now, when I say top managers to top managers, basically this means the personal ties that top managers of one company have with another. And when I say top managers to government officials, this is talking about how having close ties with government officials has helped firms in general as well. Overall, this paper is focusing on how everything so far in this regarding managerial ties has not been quantifiable. So that basically means that any information on it, any connection that people have made between the ties between people and firm performance has not been able to be put into quantifiable data. And that is what is going on with this research in this paper. So that is the big overarching goal. As well, for managerial ties, we have the contingency perspective. So they've broken this down into 4 parts: ownership, business sector, firm size, and industry growth. So the reasons for these in breaking these down is because the writers of this paper know that depending on the size, depending on the ownership, depending on how large the firm is, and overall how much they're growing in the industry is all going to have an impact on the ties and how the ties are helping them. For example, large firms are going to have more ties automatically if they've been established for many years, whereas a small upcoming firm is going to have to make more effort to make ties that they do not already have. Going into what it's about, basically they focused on Chinese firms and their managerial ties in a social context. And as I said before, wanting to quantify data, previously it's been qualitative, and now we need to see if it's quantitative. The background. So why conduct this study? Personal ties are linked to performance, and we want to know if it's quantifiable. And are ties necessary for improved performance? This is a large component of this as well. So many would argue that, firms can improve their performance through things that don't necessarily connect with ties. For example, how successful they are financially, or how they've grown in the industry with these ties not being taken into consideration. So this is why it is important to see if the study has any quantifiable results. I'm going to start off with survey methods. So when they first started, they sent out a mail survey to 27 managers and supported the concept of 2 parts, which was those 2 hypotheses that I mentioned: top managers and top managers to government officials. Once they realized that this survey method would be beneficial, they went into a larger study. They sent out 400 questionnaires with quantitative values, and they received 127 questionnaires back. So basically, the way they did this was they wanted to measure managerial ties with surveys that are self-ranked to minimize any external factors being taken into consideration. So they basically narrowed it down to suppliers, partners, all that kind of stuff, and they focused on return on assets with the most impact. So basically what this self-ranked is doing is basically they are asking managers, what are your most important ties and how are these ties helping you in your business? So it is hard to make this kind of information quantifiable, and they found that in asking people to rank their own experience, they were able to gather these results. And then after this, following, there's 3 post-HOC procedures, collecting data at different times, so it prevents the risk of overlap. Questionnaires sent separately to make sure that everybody's answering on their own terms and not realizing that they can come together and create answers as to what they would want to portray. It's actually an honest answer, and authoritative archival source as well. Going into variables, so the variables in this study are independent, contingency, and dependent. So in terms of independent, this is ties with other top managers and government officials. And in these ones, they ask general questions and reliable responses. Contingency, which is dummy variables, firm size identification, and growth measurements with quality, pricing, advertising, delivery, terms of payment. And then dependent variables, which is return on assets and market share. So with assets, they found that this was more accurate than equity. And in terms of market share, when they were measuring this, they wanted to look at the size of the market share as their variable. Finally, we have analytical methods. So we have the first 2 hypotheses, which was a regressed managerial ties with performance measures, and while they were controlling contingency and control variables. So they basically formed a regression to look at this. And then as well, they used MANOVA to assess a relative importance to managerial ties and other variables. And this is tying into firm performance as well.
In the study, the hypotheses mentioned are number 1, personal ties possessed by a firm's top managers with top managers at other firms are positively associated with firm performance. Hypothesis 2, personal ties with government officials possessed by a firm's top managers are positively associated with firm performance. Hypothesis 3a, the impact on firm performance of managerial ties with top managers at other firms is stronger for firms that are not state-owned than it is for state-owned enterprises. Hypothesis 3b, the impact on firm performance of managerial ties with government officials is stronger for firms that are not state-owned than it is for state-owned enterprises. Hypothesis 4a, the impact on firm performance of managerial ties with top managers at other firms is stronger for service firms than for manufacturing firms. Hypothesis 4b, the impact on firm performance of managerial ties with government officials is stronger for service firms than for manufacturing firms. Hypothesis 5a, the impact on firm performance of managerial ties with top managers at other firms is stronger for smaller firms than for larger firms. Hypothesis 5b, the impact of firm performance of managerial ties with government officials is stronger for smaller firms than for larger firms. Hypothesis 6a, the impact on firm performance of managerial ties with top managers at other firms is stronger for firms in low growth industries than for firms in high growth industries. Hypothesis 6b, the impact on firm performance of managerial ties with government officials is stronger for firms in low growth industries than for firms in high growth industries. Now let's move to the outcome of the tables that we have got. Regression result shows that for hypothesis 1, ties with managers at other firms have a significant and positive impact of local firms' market shares both before and after the entry of control variables. However, such ties have no important effect on ROA. Therefore, hypothesis 1 on the performance impact of managerial ties with managers at other firms is partially supported. Ties with government officials, which is mentioned in hypothesis 2, on the other hand, have a consistently significant effect on both indicators of firm performance. Results from the MANOVA test also shown by the supporting hypothesis 1 and 2, both ties with managers at other firms and ties with government officials are important to overall performance. Model 2 and 5 shows how the quality is important for both market share and ROA. In addition, the MANOVA test supports the findings from regression models. It shows, as far as overall performance is concerned, managers viewed quality as being most important and then ties with officials and with other managers' payment terms and advertising. The CHO test actually suggested that this ties have a stronger impact on non state owned enterprises than for state owned enterprises. Such connections, however, do not contribute to ROA regardless of ownership type, which is mentioned in Model 2 and 4. Hypothesis 3A is thereby partially rejected. Managerial ties with government officials are not associated with any performance measure for state owned enterprises, which is mentioned in Model 1 and 2. There is a stronger positive relationship between ties with officials and performance for non state owned enterprises than for state owned enterprises. And definitely this supporting hypothesis 3B. Overall, managerial ties with executives at other firms are important to market share for both the manufacturing. In this regard, the type of business sector does not seem to moderate the relationship between managerial ties and market share. This is not supporting hypothesis 4A. However, managerial ties with government officials are significantly beneficial to serve firms' ROA, but no impact on the ROA of manufacturing companies, which is clearly mentioned in model number 6. In other words, hypothesis 4B is supported as far as ROA is concerned, but the support for hypothesis 4B is only partial. Concerning hypothesis 5A and 5B, for smaller firms, ties with manager at other firms have a positive influence on both market share and ROA for larger firms. However, the effect of such ties is sufficient for market share but not for ROA. And we can see it in model number 10. In other words, the rate of return from investing in relationship with managers at other firms may be higher for smaller firms. That's why partially supporting hypothesis 5A. This support, however, is only managerial. The subgroup analysis further suggested that ties with government officials are significantly important to smaller firm markets and financial performance, but not crucial to larger firms' performance. And we can see that in model number 9 and 10, this finding thereby strongly supports hypothesis 5B. In model number 13, we can see the result for the test of hypothesis 6A and 6B suggested that for firms in high growth industries, ties with other managers lead to neither higher market share and not higher ROA. So this is supporting hypothesis 6A. Although managerial ties are important, a firm also needs to have capabilities in areas such as quality and advertising, along with the right resources in order to perform really well. It is easier for managerial ties to have an impact on market share than on ROA. Probably the three reasons are: developing managerial ties requires cash outflows in the form of gifts and entertainment, which may help improve market share but may be a direct drain on firm's financial result, at least in the short run. The second is there may be a time lag effect in the firm's need to improve their market position first before financial performance can be improved. The third one, at many firms, especially large state-owned enterprises where governance is weak, managers may be more interested in increasing market share than just ROI.
In the next few slides, we will be developing the relation between the abstract of the research paper and Canadian firms. We have discussed the role of managerial ties at macro and micro level. For micro level, we have analyzed a local firm in Kamloops, and for macro level, we have collected and analyzed some data about the overall Canadian companies and how the managerial ties helped in the growth of the firms. We have sourced some data about the locally owned firm named as New Leaf Produce Market. It is located at North Shore, Kamloops, and it is owned by Mr. Herman Hothi. His family is having a long history of farming in Kamloops. They own around 100 acres of agricultural land at Heffley Creek, where they produce most of their vegetables and fruits to be sold at their store in North Shore, Kamloops. Apart from this, they also have some ties with the many local farmers like Hobart Farms and Classine Farms for the supply of produce that they are not growing on their farms. They have their own dedicated distribution channel and they supply the produce in Kamloops, Kelowna, Chase, Sun Peaks, and many other parts in BC. The deliveries are usually done on Tuesdays, Thursdays, and Saturdays. They have different tie ups in Kamloops as well as surrounding areas. These are some of the examples of tie up which newly produced market has. Some of the tie ups are due to some personal relationship, and some tie ups are due to some common links. In this slide, we will develop the relation with the hypothesis. So, newly produced market ties with other firms are example of hypothesis 1, 3A, 5A, and 6A as discussed earlier in this presentation. So the first hypothesis was top managers personal tie up with top managers at other firms. So being an Indian origin, the owner at New Leaf has personal ties with owners at many Indian restaurants in Kamloops like Spice India, Nandi's Flavor, and the Raj Kitchen. And according to hypothesis 3, that is managerial ties with top managers at other firms, is stronger for firms that are not state owned enterprises. So, being an individually owned firm, New Leaf has the advantage to make decision about the price, quantity, and transportation, like whether to provide the transportation free of cost or with concession, or as well as they have to keep in mind the legal obligations and absolutely the other competitors in the market. Moving on with hypothesis 5A, that is managerial ties with top managers at other firms, is stronger for smaller firms than the larger firms. So, this can be related as the managers at Subway restaurants have the power to accumulate the vegetables from any local store. So, New Leaf has tie up with managers at Subway Fortune and Subway Twinkle store, and they supply the produce on every Thursday. And for hypothesis 6A, that is managerial ties with top managers at other firm, is stronger for firms in low growth industries than for firms in high growth industries. As described earlier, the new leaf is dealing in produce market. So the produce market is a low growth industry as the demand is more or less constant. The demand of produce is high, but it is not something which will make you tons of profit. As far as the tie-ups are concerned, they are stronger in nature, which justifies the hypothesis 6A, that is managerial tie-up with top manager at other firms is stronger for firms in low growth industries.
In this part, we will discuss about the managerial ties of Canadian firms with government. Mostly firms try to make connections with government or ruling parties to have favorable outcomes from decisions and policies of that government. In Canada, more than 50% of listed companies have political connections through the board of directors or top management. These connections benefit the firms by providing better access to financial and environmental resources. For example, getting funds sanctioned by the government, subsidized loans, and easy access to other natural resources that are available in a particular region. Companies increasingly use lobbyists to influence policymakers and thus change the public policy directly at the source so that they can maximize their profits from that policy. Most of the researchers have found that the political connections are mostly favorable for the firms and organizations and result in numerous advantages for that company. Companies make links through direct or indirect support to the parties in form of donations or fundings for their political campaigns. We have broadly taken example of fossil fuel companies and organizations in our case. Among top 10 fossil fuel companies, Encana donated more than $1.32 million to BC's Liberal and New Democratic Party, combined as per the records issued by Elections BC database. Encana's chairman and CEO Gwen Morgan personally donated $263,000 to BC Liberals as per records of Election BC database. Hypothesis 2 broadly describes this type of action by firms as it states that personal ties possessed by a firm's top managers are positively associated with the firm performance. In context to hypothesis 2, we can see that along with Encana, 48 other fossil fuel companies and industry groups donated almost $5.2 million to two parties over 8 years. Of this, 92%, that is about $4.8 million, went to BC Liberals. The image here shows contribution to BC's leading political parties by top 10 fossil fuel industry donors, which was about $3.8 million. This further explains hypothesis 2 that why companies fund and help political parties to maintain a good relationship and connection with them. Association Act, introduced in 2010, made information on lobbying public in BC. As per data released under Lobbyist Association Act 2010, top 10 fossil fuel firms report a total of 19,517 lobbying contacts between year 2010 and 2016. That is about 14 lobbying contacts per day. 28% of these contacts were directly with cabinet ministers, 48% with ministries and government agencies, and remaining 24% with MLAs. This information under this act does not release the information regarding actual and intended lobbying, but this is understood from this data why these companies make political connections. It is intended to ask for favors from the political parties they help, and hence making hypothesis 2 to be practically implemented. Thank you.